Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and I've got with me my dad, aka Little Blue, and that's right, you read the title, and you know what it is that we're reviewing, and, well, I even got the shirt, to prove this. I even
birthday present.
I was gonna say, yeah, because I had gotten this for my birthday.
23 years old today.
Yeah, from him.
At the time
as of this recording, yeah. So yes, of course, me wearing this for the first time and for this review. That's right, guys. We are reviewing the original / first versus movie, King Kong versus Godzilla, from 1963. And, well, because with those movies back then, especially for, the Godzilla films and all the other, giant monster movies, them coming from Japan and making their way to the U.S. and being U.S. dubbed. But first off, I'll read the description / the story. King Kong and Godzilla go head-to-head in an epic battle of the beast when the giant gorilla escapes from captivity in Japan and squares up to the recently thawed lizard, which that being Godzilla. Well, we'll start with you. What are the first things you have to say about, the original / first, King Kong versus Godzilla?
I watched it as a kid, so when I watched it most recently again,
and especially because we both had to watch it, before we're doing our review.
It was the first time I had watched it since I was a kid, so it was no less than what I expected. I mean, we've got the cast listed here, but who in the world can pronounce half these names? There were some Americans
some of the character names, I guess.
There were some Americans in it, Michael Keith, Harry Holcomb, and they were speaking English in it. Of course, in that they would be overdubbing in Japanese, so the Japanese people could understand it when it was released in Japan.
We're talking about the news reporters?
Yeah, they were.
And that's the thing, because the news reporters in the U.S. dubbed, well, that was filmed specifically for the U.S. version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, while the original release of, King Kong vs. Godzilla, well, because that had, full-time Japanese news reporters, well, speaking in their language, so.
Right, which to me would be more consistent. But the interesting thing about this movie is, are the special effects that, from that time, 1962, everything was done with miniatures, and of course Godzilla and King Kong were
full-bodied costumes.
Performers. With adult performers in the costumes.
Yes.
Doing which would be probably the coolest job in the world, to be Godzilla.
Absolutely. At the time, what it was like to see something like that on screen, but nowadays, because King Kong and Godzilla and any other monster creatures, them being fully CGI.
Yes.
And especially because of the visual effects, some I did notice, with some of the miniatures, and even if there were any crash sequences,
right?
Or there was even one shot I can tell. One shot where Godzilla and King Kong, they were in stop motion. Did you not notice that?
I did notice that, in fact. And there was a couple of parts where I think the film was sped up to look like it was moved. They were moving fast.
The Godzilla, I think, with the stop motion shot, Godzilla was kicked King Kong. So.
Right. So there were but the interesting thing was, you see that these kind of movies, there's always these miniatures. I would hate to be the people that build these models, because they know they're going to get destroyed. They're going to get demolished in the filming process. But to see how they do it, I mean, these buildings look like real buildings.
So much detail put into those buildings and models.
There was a scene in this where they were fighting, and they were bumping into this building, and the roof was kind of caving in, and it was just the pieces. It looked just like what you would imagine it to be if it were a full-size building.
Yeah.
So there were, I mean, it's hokey as all get out, but it's a lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely. And what about the human characters? Because we, of course, can't forget to talk about the human characters. Yes,
was-
you know, in these Godzilla movies, and no matter what giant monster movies, you know,
The character development was somewhat shallow, but it was fun to watch. It was fun to follow. I mean, there were relationships you could tell. You know you could tell what was going on. You know,
yeah,
the brother, the sister, the boyfriend, all of this, and the guy that was
girlfriend,
the guy that worked for the pharmaceutical company, and they wanted this juice that would basically be a non-addictive pain medication, which is almost unheard of. So this was a really special this berry, but it turns out these natives on this island did not want to part with it, and King Kong actually loved the juice, but it put him to sleep every time he would drink.
And they dance and sing and play the drums,
right? But it would be to calm him down, to get him to fall asleep,
right?
So he wouldn't destroy their village,
right?
Basically,
right. The only human character that I know so well in the movie, Mr. Takeo, if I said that right.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, played by how is his full name? I think I could get his last name right, just about.
Ashiro. That's a short O sound, so that's Ashira. Arishima.
Yeah, because Mr.
Ashira Arishima.
Yeah, because Mr. Takeo, he was the one that was being responsible for Kong. And he didn't want any harm coming to Kong, and because Kong was the answer to take on Godzilla.
And there was the scene, of course, when he after King Kong fell asleep after drinking the juice. They managed to get him on a raft,
right,
and tied him down, and had dynamite set up around him, so that if they had to destroy him if he got loose, and
Mr. Takeo was this close pulling down.
Yeah, exactly. The plunger on the dynamite.
And when he did at one point, because he just. They realized it wasn't working.
Well, of course, then they did. When they detonated the TNT, it didn't even faze King Kong. It just destroyed the raft he was on, and he fell under the water, and then he came up, and he's pretty ticked off. So
you really don't want to piss off King Kong.
No, not really. So it was, and there was a point where Kong was afraid of Godzilla. Godzilla burned him. He scorched his chest. So he runs away, kind of flees.
Yeah,
but
And the fact that Godzilla would still burn him a couple of other times.
And you have to say that King Kong is smarter than Godzilla. Because Godzilla is, after all, a dinosaur, like a lizard, and their brains are pea-sized, basically.
And thus they explain it.
And
the size of Godzilla's brain, the size
Kong's
of
brain would be huge because he's a primate.
Yeah.
So anyway,
especially like when Godzilla is discovered, because like this submarine and how it discovers like something is glowing in this giant ice, and how it unthaws, and well, lo and behold, it's Godzilla.
Right. Which brings to mind the captain of this submarine. When they this guy was just I don't know if he's listed in the characters or not. He may be. But he was captain of vessel. No, that's captain of the ship. This guy was an American scientist in the submariner.
And the the performers of King Kong and Godzilla. Yeah, because Godzilla, I guess, had 2 performers. So, and King Kong just had 1. So.
I think Douglas Fine was the name. He was the commander, Commander Roberts. Wait a minute, move back. You're going too fast there.
All right.
So. He was the commander. But it was just kind of it was a little hokey. His lines. There were some lines that were hokey, and I think especially it might have been lost in translation.
And especially moments where they're shouting, but like the English dub, like not so good.
Right. It's sort of like
Godzilla. Yeah. it's Godzilla. Like,
exactly.
yeah. So, and how painful. I meant to bring this up. How it's painfully obvious in the English dub. Like with the news reporters, they are speaking English and such. But when we come to like the Japanese characters and actors, well, you can tell because of the English dub over them. So it's painfully obvious with the U.S. version. So,
well, like I said, as a child, it used to annoy me because I couldn't understand why they couldn't sync up the sound with they couldn't sync up the sound, the voices with the lips as the lips moved.
yeah,
It drove me crazy. And then years later, I figured out, okay, they were speaking Japanese and they were overdubbing in English. That's why it didn't. But sometimes
I had
it
a
was
feeling.
actually sometimes it actually was pretty close.
Sometimes, yeah, and we say sometimes. You know, when Godzilla is roaming around and making his way to Tokyo, even like I think the Tokyo government does not approve of Kong showing up.
Oh yeah, the Japanese government says to keep King Kong out of Japan.
And yet the fact that Kong is their only hope to taking on Godzilla.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, you know, here's another thing. Like, in this movie, Godzilla is the villain. And there have been a couple of movies of Godzilla's where he is the bad guy.
Well, as a rule, and I think I told you this, usually the hero is listed first, and it's versus whoever the villain is.
Yeah.
So in this case, it was King Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Rodan, Godzilla versus Megalodon. You know, those are because in those movies, Godzilla is the good guy. Godzilla is the protector of Tokyo in Japan. You know, and so you know he still tears stuff up.
Yeah.
He's,
yeah.
You know,
yeah. You know, even in the MonsterVerse films, like, you know, Godzilla is the hero. And I think, like, I feel as though, because for a little while, like, Kong, you know, he was kind of being, like, an evil monkey. But, I don't know, I mean, and with, like, you know, Godzilla and Kong, you know, New Empire, I guess, you know, because, you know, they're on good terms. So, but anyways. And more on the human characters, because, like, you know, especially, like, the citizens of Tokyo, Japan evacuating because of Godzilla and Kong.
Exactly.
Especially, like, the girlfriend, she was on, like, a bullet train, and Kong got a hold of the train and snatched that girlfriend.
Yeah. And then, of course, he makes his way to the top of this building, which you're like, here we go. It is the King Kong movie all over again from, what was it, 1930? It was like
33.
33.
Yeah. Well, and all the other movie adaptations of King Kong. So, on that version of King Kong, that is. Well, not to mention, we do get Skull Island in this movie.
Yeah, but it's not called Skull Island. There's another name for it. I can't recall what the name is, but it's and that's another interesting part. Isn't it just really strange that the natives on that island just all happen to be of Asian descent?
Yeah.
It's because they used Japanese actors and they painted their face.
Yeah,
color.
and they got makeup and such
Exactly.
to look like natives. Are we not going to say anything about the giant octopus?
The giant octopus was kind of
Yes. Convincing.
Yeah. Although the
There
sound
were
effects,
like actual shots of an octopus, but sometimes there would be like a model or something for the octopus when Kong is, you know, wrestling with the octopus. Those sound effects of the tentacles.
I could just imagine that the sound effects. They got a big pot of macaroni and cheese and put their hand down in it. It was going, and then they put a microphone on it and magnify, and that was the sound of the squid or the octopus. You never know.
You never know.
The sound of the gun cocks in Star Wars is a meter, parking meter being turned.
Right.
So there's
sound of blasters come from like a slink eater or whatever. So
yeah, and also the sound of the tauntauns walking comes from an actual metal press. In a metal
and
press.
The sound of Wookiees come from bears, lions, and tigers. So
it's easy. It's easy to figure that they
those examples and comparisons. So
there's a lot of things they can do to make these sounds to make them sound convincing. And, if you go back and look, even back in the 1930s when they were doing Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. Some of the sound effects, the ship would come down and land, and it sounded like this is basically what it sounded like
Right.
It didn't sound anything like a spaceship landing on the surface of a planet. It was just the worst kind of sound effects you could imagine.
Yep.
But that, they've obviously improved, and I thought the sound effects were good in this movie.
Yeah.
I thought the visual effects were amazing.
Let's not forget Godzilla and King. Both of them, each of them, their roars.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah.
How can we not, talk about that?
That Godzilla roar is so unique, and so it is
iconic.
Iconic. It is my favorite monster roar of all time. There is nothing that comes close to it. Not even the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. I'm sorry, that's scary.
I mean, the T-Rex roar is up there with the Godzilla.
It's up there.
Roar.
It's up there, but it would fall in second place, in my opinion. Godzilla is absolutely number one.
I'd say that's about right.
The Godzilla roar is so recognizable and so iconic that you can't compare it to anything.
And how did King Kong's roar did for you? Do for you?
It was good. It was very much like the original. I think the original King Kong, and even the movie that came out, I think in '76, which I went to the theater and saw, by the way,
starring Jeff Bridges
and Jessica Lange, a very young Jessica Lange,
and the late Charles Grodin, who was in it too.
Jessica Lange was actually her first. It was her movie debut, in fact. And they used that roar, and some of it sounded like the same type of roar that they had that they did in the in the original Kong. It sounded like the original sounds,
right?
Some of it,
yeah. So, and more on the effects, like the models and such, like how sometimes a lot of close up shots of Kong's face and how his face is moving. Yeah, because his eyes, and he's blinking and such, and eating some of that fruit and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
And Godzilla, it always cracks me up because some of his body language, when he's he'll actually clap. If you've ever seen him clap.
Godzilla does.
And there was one scene when there was one scene I remember I laughed. That Kong got him and flipped him right over it.
Yes,
flipped him over his head. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was pretty cool.
And how they tumble on that mountain, just
it's really impressive the way they do those visual effects and the way they can bring them to scale and make them look like they're giants. In this world.
Yeah,
it's really amazing to me.
Absolutely. And more with Kong, because, he snatched that girlfriend and, the boyfriend and the others, let me see, the girlfriend is, do you know, because we have the boyfriend, girlfriend, we have a brother and sister, do you know anything about that and the connection with some of those characters?
It was, the brother was, he was a scientist, he was an inventor, and he had created this steel cable with this thin steel cable that had a high tensile strength. And that's what they used actually to transport Godzilla with the helicopter.
Yes.
They used that steel
first a raft, and then they used giant balloons.
And with the steel that they had him suspended and was basically floating him back.
Yes.
Trying to float him out of Japan. And then of course along comes Godzilla.
Yeah. And them saving, the girlfriend, that's how we're calling her. That's because, she is.
Yeah, she's the girlfriend.
Well, because they have to, play the drums and use that fruit. But, use, dust, powder, I want to say. Yeah, and playing the drums and such, and that works. So, and thus, by using those giant balloons, floating him out of there, of the city, and, to take on Kong and such. And by the way, because a few moments with say Mr. Takeo and a couple of others, I'm betting on Kong, taking on Godzilla. So
yeah, he does a coin flip and it comes up
heads, tails,
and it came up tails, and he was like, because he lost, he would have lost the bet.
Because he betted on Kong.
He was betting on Kong,
and he lost.
Yeah, he lost on the coin toss, but Kong won in the end, or did he? I don't think Godzilla died in that. I think Godzilla just disappeared underwater.
That whole fight, at that mountain, was a really cool moment in the movie.
It really was.
Yeah, and again, moments as you point out, where Kong was flipped and there was a stop motion shot for just a few seconds where Godzilla kicked Kong, and a few times where Kong was knocked out.
Yeah.
And then, like, an electric storm came in and hit Kong, and that, according to one of them, because that gives him
electricity, gives him extra power.
Yes.
It gives him like super strength. And
so he can definitely kick Godzilla's butt. So
it was kind of on cue when they said, "Oh, here comes the thunderstorm," and if the lightning strikes, it will give Kong. And it struck him twice, which they say lightning rarely strikes twice in the same place, but it did then, and it struck Kong twice. But why didn't it get Godzilla? Godzilla was standing up. Godzilla was taller. And usually lightning will strike the tallest.
He's filled with nuclear energy, power, that kind of stuff. So
anyway, it struck Kong twice.
To think
he got his superpower. It was sort of like Popeye with his spinach, you know.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. And yeah, again, because he's kicking Godzilla's butt, and they of course they're still breaking and destroying bits and pieces of Tokyo. And again, with those fantastic models, and like you said, just how much effort it took for them to build them and such, and for them to be destroyed. Well, it was for this movie, so, and for any other movie, just...
look, I get it. You watch these movies, you giggle, you laugh, how corny, how silly, but if you really pay attention and look at the detail in the miniatures, in the special effects, 1962 is when this was made. This was long before George Lucas. This was long before any CGI or anything else.
It was made in 1962 and then released a year later.
Okay, fair enough. But it's made in 1962. So at the time it's made,
when they're filming it, that is,
they're having to really get creative. And of course, leave it to the Japanese to get as creative as they do. Those models are fantastic. They're so detailed.
Yes.
The miniatures, even the helicopters that fly over,
those are miniatures. Like, there's even construction vehicles that we see that are miniatures.
Sure.
A bullet train.
Yes.
As well,
tanks.
In Japan, they have bullet trains.
Yes,
so,
of course.
and you can even to this day how they look, how you see them, those miniatures.
Exactly.
I tell you. And also, jumping back to the news reporters, because again, throughout the film, they're reporting on the whereabouts and what's going on with the situation of King Kong and Godzilla. And I feel as though, they all seem to know that King Kong is the good guy. And Godzilla, but yeah, because what's happening with King Kong, and before he snatched the girlfriend, he's going on a rampage technically, right?
He is.
That's because they made him mad at one point. So that's what happens if you piss off King Kong. So, but and with the final battle between King Kong and Godzilla, because this time King Kong is not running away, even when he still gets burned by Godzilla. He's taking on Godzilla.
Picks Godzilla up by the tail and slings him. That was fun.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah. And even when he detached from those balloons, because he ran straight towards Godzilla as he slid down the mountain.
He body slammed him. Man.
Yes,
it was awesome.
Yeah, and because they tumbled down and go down the ocean, because that caused an earthquake. Yeah, technically,
and a massive slide.
Yes.
So
breaking apart, just
all these things that were done with miniatures that looked so real.
Yes,
it's really impressive. It really is. If you go and you look at any of these monster movies and look at the miniatures and the intricate detail of these buildings, of these vehicles, the landscape, everything, the trees, the power lines, everything down to the last detail, and then these guys in costumes come along and just rip it up, and just destroy it.
And because I just remembered something. Because speaking of trees, there was one moment where King Kong was, I guess, he shoved a tree in Godzilla's mouth.
Yeah, I saw that. That was funny. I remember that when he was on fire. He jams it into his mouth,
and almost burning King Kong.
I almost wonder. I can almost picture how they would hire these model builders for these movies. Just to check their temperance, to see they would say, okay, build. I want you to build, and they give them the material, and they say, okay, we're giving you 1 day to build a replica of some building in Japan, some famous landmark in Japan. So this guy is he's working, and so then they come in the next day. oh, that is really good. Smack! And just bust it all to pieces. And see what his reaction is. You know, if he's like,
And
if
if
he's like, what? You know, and he
and
goes
well,
nuts. then-
as if they wouldn't tell him what would happen next. So.
Yeah, exactly. And just to see his temperament, you know, because that would have to be as much work as they put into that. To sit, they just have to detach themselves emotionally.
And I were to assume that they would of course know that, you know, these models, everything that they're building for these kind of movies, they're going to be destroyed, you know, in the movie.
Yeah.
They would have to know.
Well, anyway, what can you say? I mean, the movie itself to me was...
Well, and that's the thing, because, like, at the end, like, technically, or did he? King Kong defeated Godzilla.
King Kong, I think Godzilla fled. I think he fled deeper into the ocean to get away from Kong. I don't think he died, but Kong was swimming back to that island. That's where, obviously, he was going.
Going back to his home.
To his home, yeah.
Yeah, and like a chopper's kind of following Kong, so...
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of the dialogue got a little silly at times. Some of the premise, you know, the way they set up the scenes with the reporters and everything.
Yeah, I think even the news reporters don't know either if Godzilla was defeated.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because, you know, the news reporters get the last lines of the movie about, you know, the aftermath of King Kong and he's swimming away and, you know, what did happen to Godzilla? That's the thing. So
it's left. There's a big question mark there, but
yeah,
we know Godzilla survived. We know Godzilla survived. So
because this is Godzilla we're talking about.
Yeah, King of the Monsters.
He can never be defeated. Neither say King Kong.
No.
I mean, with the exception of, you know, the King Kong movie starting in 1933, and then a couple of more, you know, remakes of that story of King Kong where he did get killed. So, and of course, you know, it wasn't the airplanes, it was Beauty killed the Beast in that version of King Kong. So, yeah. But in this version of King Kong, yeah, because he can't be defeated. Not to mention, because this King Kong, because, you know, whenever King Kong, like, is, you know, put with Godzilla, because, you know, King Kong is massive. Unlike how the size of King Kong in, you know, the standalone King Kong movies. So, I mean, be about almost like the height of a house. It depends, like, you know. But yeah, King Kong versus Godzilla. Like, you know, this being the original / first versus movie before any other, you know, versus movie, like anything that had to do with King Kong and Godzilla coming together, even the MonsterVerse films, like this being the original. Yeah. And you know what? I mean, it did make film history, don't you think?
Yeah. And if you ask me to rate it, I know what my rating is.
Well, I mean, before that, like, what are your final results and thoughts on the movie itself?
It's a fun movie to watch. It's a fun movie to watch. Even as an adult, it's a fun movie to watch.
This and all the other films from Japan, how they filmed them with practical stuff, are fun to watch. They're so memorable. You know,
you don't have to be a student of film or, you know, understand special effects to appreciate the film itself.
Yeah.
But if you can really look at the detail and appreciate the detail of the miniatures, of the way things are done, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating movie to watch.
Absolutely. And it just, you know, just be a sucker for anything practical, you know, because it's right there.
Exactly.
So even the monsters, Godzilla, King Kong, the list goes on.
So rating.
Okay, yes, the rating. So yeah, we'll start with you, of course.
Okay.
How would you rate it?
Character development and dialogue, I would have to give it a 2. The visual effects, all a solid 5. So combine the two, that brings it to a 3. I'd give it a solid 3 stars.
Well,
3 out of 5.
What about the visual effects and the others? You know,
I gave it a 5. I gave the visual effects and
character development. You gave it 2.
Is 5. I gave it 2 for character development because it wasn't great character development, not great dialogue between the characters. Some of that could have been lost in translation from the Japanese to the American translation, but I gave it a 2. So you combine the two, take an average, it's 3.
Yeah.
So 3 stars.
Yeah. You know,
which is still good.
I mean, I guess, you know, sometimes, like, you know, there can be, you know, in a Godzilla movie, any of those kind of movies, like, sometimes they can have good human characters.
So what do you give it?
Well, you know, good question. it's on my mind. I would agree with how you rate that stuff, from the character development, the visual effects, and so on. But the movie itself, for me, yes, I mean, it's on my mind. I give it, 7 out of 10 stars. For me, 7 out of 10 stars for the original / first versus movie, King Kong versus Godzilla from 1963. Yeah.
Good movie, give it a watch.
It is. It's
fun movie, I'll say.
Yes, it is a fun movie, and if you are a sucker for anything that's practical on screen, and from the models, like the monsters on screen, like full body costumes, and if you enjoy the Japanese films that are turned to English dubbed and such. Any of those movies, that were made, like, this, anything else, Godzilla, War of the Gargantuas, those movies, funny, sometimes they can be funny, right?
Yeah, sometimes they can be funny, sometimes they can be, pretty
yes,
cool.
Yes, and I was also going to say, fun, entertaining, memorable movies, and some of them, especially this, making film history.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So that's how we rate it, as, you heard. So what about you guys? What do you think of King Kong versus Godzilla itself? Any of you that had seen this, and, whether if you watch the Japan version, its original release, or watch the US dubbed version, and, the practical effects, and if you enjoyed some of the human characters, the only one I've enjoyed in this was Mr. Tego. Yeah.
He was colorful, that's for sure.
He was, yeah. And how he relied on King Kong. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that, and, and the model, the practical effects, seeing King Kong and Godzilla on screen, everything that we've had to say about this movie. And yeah, what did you think of our review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. So, any last words?
I must be off.
He says that. For me, thank you very much for watching. We hope you guys enjoyed our review of King Kong versus Godzilla from 1963, the one that started it all, and by having King Kong and Godzilla come together. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and we'll see you guys in the next video / review. Take care, and peace out.
And in the spirit of Japanese overdub movies, peace out.
Peace out. Bye-bye.